The previous research, we've identified 4 key skills for AI literacy: application and authenticity, accountability, and agency. So our study examined how AI can aid learners in understanding their learning processes and developing critical thinking and enhancing metalinguistic abilities. So we conducted at both beginning and intermediate levels to explore these aspects. So in the beginning level of Japanese course, we implemented an interview project with native speakers, and the goals were to practice asking questions in Japanese and reflect on cultural linguistic aspects and increase interest and motivation in Japanese language learning. And the level of learners is as shown, so Act 4 goal is novice, mid, high level in this course. The project follows these steps. So the learners were instructed to use AI to check for vocabulary and grammatical errors in the self-written draft. And reflecting on the previous research, we developed the guidelines for applying the 4 skills of AI literacy here to this interview project. So please see the number 5. And number 5, learners use AI here. So step 1 is for application and using AI to verify the accuracy of self-written composition. So this purpose is to gain experience in how AI can be utilized for learning Japanese language. And the instructor guided that make prompt specific, clearly stating the actions learners want the AI to take, and those learners don't, and instruct AI not to use unlearned kanji characters. I'm going to explain about the kanji characters later. And step 2 is for agency, considering prompt writing techniques to objectively understand on Japanese language skills and elicit AI suggestions tailored to current proficiency levels. So this purpose is reflecting on Japanese language skills and exploring the most efficient and effective ways to utilize AI for autonomous Japanese learning. And step 3 is for authenticity, carefully considering which AI suggestions to accept and highlighting the changes made. So the instructor guided that try to understand why each change is being suggested and how it improves on essay. Step 4 is for accountability, reflecting on how to critically consider decisions to adapt AI suggestions or not. The instructor guided that consider whether learners can use AI appropriately and the reasons why in the context revising on essay in Japanese. We also provided example prompts to guide learners considering the complexity of Japanese writing system. So this is a Japanese newspaper example. So Japanese writing uses the 3 systems, hiragana, katakana, and kanji. And kanji is actually most challenging, especially for the beginners. With over 2,000 common kanji characters, beginners just start by learning 177. But here is a catch. Many kanji have multiple readings and meanings. So you could imagine the overwhelm when encountering unfamiliar kanji for learners. And the key challenge is that AI can use any kanji without considering learner's level, creating a gap between AI output and beginner comprehension. And I'm going to move the learner's example. And this is a learner's A. This is the original one, like learner A created. And this one is after AI checked. So learner A used pretty specific prompts, but often adopted unnecessary AI suggestions due to lack of the confidence. And learner B used really baggy prompts, so I guess learner B didn't read the instruction at all. So resulting is overly complex AI suggestion. So this is actually the example we really wanted to avoid most. And Lana C also used the Baguio prompts. However, Lana C is a native Chinese speaker who benefited from kanji knowledge in understanding advanced AI suggestions. So in the beginning Japanese course, our observation on the 4 essential skills of AI literacy application mostly instructor-directed, but some learners explore the expression variety. And authenticity, beginners struggle to critically evaluate AI suggestions, but the native Chinese speaker seems to benefit from kanji knowledge. And accountability concerns about AI's understanding of cultural context and speech level. And agency, AI's complex suggestions mostly cause confusion. So dictionaries and maybe the translation apps are more convenient than AI checking in this level, but also prompt awareness of foundational learning importance. So these insights suggest that project prompted metalinguistic language awareness, even as the beginners very struggle with AI interaction in the beginning course.
Okay, next, I would like to explain how we use AI checking for the self-learning project for the intermediate course. So for this project, learners design a task focusing on their Japanese skills that they want to improve, and they worked on them throughout the semester. And all the students have had some sort of writings to submit, so they use AI to review them before submitting. And the purpose of AI checking that I presented in the class was it's educational and learning aids/tools that learners can have an opportunity to critically analyze what AI suggests and learn from them. And I emphasize that the goal is not for the learners to submit the error-free writings assisted by the AI. And I made sure they are aware that the accuracy of their writings are not graded. This is the AI checking guideline based on the 4 skills of AI literacy. And the section that's related to each skills are marked in the same color. So for the step 1, when they choose, learners were free to choose any AI tools and also the prompt to use. And the idea here was for them to have the opportunity to experiment different AIs and find the best one that's more helpful for their purpose. And also share to the class. And then they evaluate the AI suggestions, select at least 3 suggestions that they think are important for their revision. And through that process, I told them to pay attention to these 4 points. And the idea here was for them to have deeper reflections on of their analysis. And they, while they revise to their final writings, they used a commenting function on the word to provide a detailed explanation of why they didn't adapt the suggestions from the AI. And this process encouraged them to take responsibility for their analysis and the decision. So next, I would like to show examples from 2 learners. Learner A read the newspaper articles in Japanese and wrote a summary of them. And this is the original summary written by learner A. This is what AI suggested, and this is the final revision from the learner A. And if you take a look at the comments from learner A, while he analyzed the vocabulary that AI suggested, which is highlighted, underlined in green here, he decided to retain his original vocabulary because it fits more in line with the tone and the context of what he was summarizing. And the learner B listened to the Japanese songs, wrote down the lyrics, and he also wrote his personal interpretations. And he stated on his comment section, he decided to adapt the expression that AI suggested because it accomplished to explain more clearly what he wanted to explain. However, this is not written on here, but he wrote that on the self-reflection. He decided to retain the subject of this sentence because it aligned more on his interpretations. These are the self-reflections from both learner A and B, and I would like to analyze these from the core skills of AI literacy. So both learners stated AI checking was helpful for learning new vocabularies and expressions, and also to learn from AI suggestions. However, learner A stated because AI sometimes make mistakes, he learned it was necessary and important to check afterwards. And learner B also stated it was AI checking was helpful. However, he stated he didn't want to rely too much on AI because it would be a waste of his knowledge and what he had been learning. So from these reflections, we can say that they both carefully integrated AI suggestions while maintaining their own efforts and styles. And they also evaluated AI suggestions critically and made decisions. And they showed active engagement with the AI use, also taking responsibility of how they used it and on their selections. And these processes help them understand deeper of the language use. And one of the AI literacy skills application, while learners were free to choose any AI tools, most of them just stuck with one tool, and we couldn't. I didn't go deeper with that, but the reason might be they were just too busy or simply not interested in discovering other AI tools. But however, some learners who had never used AI or simply avoided using AI, or some learners who didn't even know they can use AI with Japanese, found that AI can be used for Japanese learning, so they were appreciating that discovery. For the conclusion and our findings, so we found that the way we use AI for learners' autonomous learning and for the metalinguistic skills, it was useful for some learners for the intermediate level, and we found it was challenging for the beginning level learners, mainly due to their lack of language and the cultural knowledge, and they needed a constant feedback from the instructors. So we thought they could be more benefited from using AI to support their learning process. And And another thing we found was the prompt instruction had a minimal impact for their learning. Especially, I want to emphasize this, but for the use that we used for the study. So we did some experiment by giving detailed instructions for the entry-level course and providing 0 instruction for the intermediate course. However, we observed both successful and less satisfactory results on both courses. And as the research shows, because AI is evolving daily, it might be more effective to collaborate with AI by giving multiple instructions and find the best result, rather than spending too much time on trying to generate the best prompt to instruct the students. So for the AI used to support learning process, maybe a conversation practice, especially for the entry-level learners, might be beneficial for them. Other things, brainstorming for the topics for the speech, or to do the research, or the discussion questions can be beneficial for both, for all the levels. And in this way, they can gain diverse perspectives and knowledges, also take responsibility for the AI use and learning, and it can enhance their autonomous learnings. So AI is evolving daily. There will be more opportunity and chances that we get opportunities and chances, and the ways to use AI for language learning in the future. So we appreciate any comments, input, or the way you have been using AI for the language learning to share today with us. Thank you very much.
Not too much. Nobody has ever accused me of projecting my voice, so with your permission, I will use the microphone. I would like to thank Veronica and Anne-Marie, especially for sponsoring this talk and for hosting us and welcoming us. I also want to acknowledge the ASL interpreters, and if at some point I do something that makes your job difficult, please let me know. It has been a very stimulating symposium. I've learned a lot yesterday and in the talks today, and surely in the talks that will come. I would check myself against the impulse of calling it generative, not only because of the distinction that Laurent drew yesterday between generative and creative, but because generative in this context sounds a little bit like tech bro jargon, and I want to make sure that I step away from that. I was particularly impressed by my former colleague Takako Ekawa's distinction yesterday, or challenge to think about why do we need AI? What is the added value of using AI? And I really like some of the examples that we saw yesterday and today, right? I'm thinking in particular about the complex and multi-layer integration and research-driven integration of AI in communication, as in the case of Nicole and Thomas yesterday, or in assessment with the example that Adriana and Ben offer yesterday too, or in the case of AI literacy that our colleagues Julia and Rosella offered this morning. And also in thinking about the potential for and limitation of AI for multilingualism, accessibility, and code switching. And I'm thinking in particular of Raja's presentation, but also Thomas, who's not here today. And I was also particularly impressed that we heard about Greek mythology, but that the reference was to the Odyssey and not to Pandora, which is the usual reference in this when this topic comes up. So before starting today, I want to clarify the sense in which I use artificial intelligence. I think the metaphors and the anthropomorphizing, I think I probably added too many syllables in there, that we use when we talk about technology, artificial intelligence, generative AI, large language models, natural language processing in particular, could probably keep us busy for a few hours just discussing the metaphors. We could use instead language simulation. We could talk about simulacra. We could use other terms. So those are the terms that we have. But AI, I acknowledge that AI is a large field of inquiry, and it alludes to a very encompassing set of technologies and tools. So for the purposes of the presentation today, I'm using AI to mean anything that lets us interact with devices as if we were communicating with another person, whether that's ChatGPT or predictive keyboard or voice recognition. And I also want to make a note that large language models compute how you and I speak and write, and are able to produce human-like output, but there is nothing human about how they learn, understand, and use language. And in fact, they do neither of those three, as other presenters have more cogently explained before me. The release of OpenAI's ChatGPT in late 2022 sparked all kinds of reactions in higher education across all disciplines. Let me go back, sorry. All kinds of task forces, departmental task forces, college task forces, also but in language departments in particular, we try to scramble to study its effects and affordances in language instruction, right? I think our field has traditionally been very tech-friendly, but I think, or my impression is that the reaction to ChatGPT echoed some of the cautious and defensive response that our profession had to the improvements in online translation about a decade ago. Today, I would like to talk about attitudes, policies, and practices regarding the adoption of AI in language programs based on a local survey at my institution and also surveying nearby colleagues. The purpose of the survey was to provide a snapshot of AI literacy in the training of language teachers and in the professional development of language faculty in general at different stages of their career. And well, this is a quickly evolving area in our field. My hope is to provide, if not a roadmap, at least spark a conversation about how large language models can or should become part of the component of the critical digital literacy skills of language instructors. So the guiding questions that I had in mind were, what are some of the attitudes that language faculty hold about AI? What correlation is there between AI literacy and attitudes about AI? What opportunities are there for increasing AI literacy, specifically for faculty at later stages in their career? And how does AI literacy feature in the training and professional development of language instructors? So some of the questions were aimed at gauging the attitudes about and familiarity with AI, and also the comfort level with language learning technology in general. Some of the questions, you have them here. I'm not going to read through them all, but how familiar are you with AI? How often do you use tools like ChatGPT? How would you rate the impact of ChatGPT in higher education, in second language education? What do you think are the most worrisome aspects or the most promising aspects of AI in our profession? I was also interested in what policies, if any, our departments, our schools, our colleges, our universities have adopted or implemented regarding AI, either in its integration in the classroom or in academic integrity statements. What kinds of policies are out there in our institutions? But also finding out whether the hype that sometimes our institutions, our colleges contribute to creating about AI, I wanted to find out whether those institutions are putting their money where their mouth is in terms of supporting faculty and instructional technologies in helping us use some of these tools. And finally, I was interested in exploring AI, the role of AI professional development. I think something that struck me also about that most of our presentations have in common or have had in common is a disclaimer about our tech expertise, right? A few of us, some of us in the audience are, but most of us are not really experts in the subject matter. And we have largely taken it upon ourselves to learn and to invest in exploring the affordances of this technology. But my hunch is that we need something a little bit more systematic, right? That we need to think about how we can make this more systematic in the training of graduate students in programs that have graduate students, but also in the opportunities that we offer faculty at different stages. Some of the questions are here. I'm not going to go through them again, but those were more or less the guiding the questions that I had, and I left these questions out in part because Dartmouth does not have graduate students, and I wanted to test the survey first locally. We do have undergraduate TAs, but they work on a different model. So it wasn't, and we do train them a little bit in AI, but it's not really, it didn't really serve the purpose of what I was trying to do. But I am definitely eager to, how many of you have graduate students in your programs? Or, so you can expect an email from me later asking for your collaboration in how you're integrating these topics in your methods classes, and also hearing from students about how they are responding to this technology. The findings were not terribly surprising, but they led to interesting conclusions nonetheless. As expected, familiarity with technology was a more useful variable in predicting attitudes about AI than it is the number of years that we have worked. Let's see, I arrived in the United States to teach in 2001. ChatGPT came out in 2022. I had 20 years of experience plus a few years in Spain before. Obviously, my openness to ChatGPT or to AI was not determined by my age or years of experience. It was more about my comfort level beforehand, right? So that translated into other people's responses as well. That said, even with people who were sympathetic or who were comfortable with technology, responses varied quite a bit, and they echoed some of the framework that Kirchner and others proposed about responses to technology, mapping onto different categories of enthusiasm, determinism, romanticism, and skepticism. I'm firmly in the red column. I'm more on the skepticism column, but I've heard responses of all colors. Not to get too cute with this slide. Among the concerns, again, not surprisingly, academic honesty was the main one in terms of classroom management, and also redundancy in terms of the profession at large, right? Those were the most commonly cited. But there were others like privacy, along the lines of what we discussed yesterday with FERPA and putting student work online. There were concerns about hallucination, which we've discussed today also. There were also concerns about whether that content would be used to train models. And there's also increasing concern about the environmental cost of the large computing demands of AI and the sustainability of doing it blindly, right? Just because we can. And a query is about twice this amount of water. If we multiply by how many times we query and our students querying, then we get to a swimming pool pretty quickly. It's really not at the user that we need to be concerned. It's about the large computing demands that cloud technology and AI requires. Anyway, I'll take a minute to. The areas of promise that stood out were conversely similar conversation, right? How communication, like we saw in the case of Nicole's project yesterday, both in text and in audio. Also in prompting, engineering, and developing writing proficiency around prompting AI as a professional skill that might be necessary in the future. Feedback and tutoring was also something that was seen with promise. Support with pronunciation, and in general, digital literacy. There was, at the same time, though, more skepticism about AI and foundational skills, particularly around writing, with things like brainstorming or helping with developing drafts. Respondents felt like that was not as promising a path. In terms of policies, there was clear frustration with the lack of clear guidelines and the ambiguity of leaving decisions to individual faculty members. And while it makes sense for institutions to not be able to have a blanket statement that applies to every possible situation, it does put a lot of pressure on faculty to come up with policies and implement those policies in cases that can be, especially when there's academic integrity involved, that can be quite controversial and fraught. And not surprisingly, the lack of instructional and financial support also correlated with more negative attitudes. Faculty who used ChatGPT 3 had different opinions and different experiences than faculty who had access to a premium version of ChatGPT, version 4 or 4.0. Let's see. And lastly, there was a high level of interest in having quality professional development opportunities available to language faculty, regardless of the stage, regardless of experience, regardless of previous interest. There was a need to understand the technology and to understand how to use it and how not to use it. And there was some frustration about the vagueness of some of the, especially at the beginning. At my institution in particular, some of the guests that we had offered pretty general overviews of the technology, and they were aimed at different disciplines at the same time, and it was not specific enough for language, and it was a little bit frustrating. But there was strong preference for discipline-specific training, and with detailed demonstrations of AI-enhanced practices that are backed by research, that are demonstrably useful in class. So it seems clear then that we need something a little bit more systematic, and there's a need for a better understanding of what AI is and what it offers. A need, if you want to demystify AI. Going back to Takako's question yesterday, to Takako's challenge, to think about what does AI bring to the table. And it brings things. We need to know what those are and how to go about bringing them to our experiences. And to work backwards from our goals and from our needs, and then incorporating AI as needed, rather than the other way around, trying to impose AI on things that we may or may not be doing already. And there's also clearly a need to have greater clarity in terms of policies and responsibilities. The things on the right are more my own concerns, my own sometimes I like to get the high horse and judge other people. I'm sorry. Those are my own concerns, right? I think critical digital literacy is key for both students and instructors. And I mentioned earlier that human-like output that is not human, and I think we need to keep that in mind also when we ask our students to interact with the chatbot. And I think there are also issues of equity that Kim mentioned yesterday, right, in her question, but not only between institutions, but also between students and what version of those tools students are able to access. And there's also a question of historical perspective. I think we've been through several cycles of boom and bust in learning technology. Right, the ghosts of MOOCs are still roaming the hallways of our universities, and while I don't think that AI is going to go the way of MOOCs, I think it's here to stay. It is also useful to resist the temptation to fall into what Emily Bender, the scholar, the computer scientist behind the terms stochastic parrot, calls AI hype, right? The mysterious, the theater of AI hype. And so we need to give ourselves permission also to be skeptical and to opt out if we don't need to use it, right? We can also make the decision that we don't need AI, and often that will be fine. But like I said, I don't want to play to continue with the Odyssey and the Trojan references. I don't want to play the role of Cassandra. Rather, I look forward to conversations with you and collaborating in gathering and analyzing information about how we go about systematizing professional development and AI in our graduate programs or not graduate programs, with our teaching faculty, with our colleagues, etc. Thank you.
So thanks to Roberto, because I think he's queued up my presentation in one way. I will say that as I've thought about how, everybody is hearing me okay? So as I thought about, how do you begin to use this tool in the classroom, it brings for me larger issues, right? And I need to think through those issues. I think we all need to think through those issues. So as I'm going along in my presentation, I think it may feel as if the plane is circling the airport for a little bit, but I promise you that I will eventually land the plane. All right. So generative AI, GAI, is a very complex topic, and over the last 24 hours of the symposium, we've had the benefit of new insights and strategies for wrestling with GAI in the academy. So in this paper, what I want to do, okay, is focus on 3 persistent challenges that nearly always accompany any significant technological advance: its ability to disrupt our pedagogical models, and the ease with which everyone can lead into the darker side of its uses, also known as cheating, and lastly, its potential to enhance learning. As Randy Bass stated in his 2018 article on technology and human learning, technology is both a tool, a force, and a threat. So we've been musing about thinking machines since at least 1872 in the publishing of Samuel Butler's novel Erewhon, and in the ensuing 140 years, in Western culture has represented AI alternatively as a benevolent helper or killing machine. So alongside a friendly android such as Data in Star Trek and his Pinocchio-like desire to be human, there are dystopian nightmares where the machines are hunting humans. And one needs to look no further than the Terminator franchise for darker versions of AI where machines turn on their inventors. AI always seemed to be the stuff of science fiction, but now thinking machines seem to be becoming a reality. So on November 30th, as you all know, of 2022, OpenAI, an IT firm, introduced ChatGPT to the world. According to its founder, Sam Altman, it had 1 million users within the first 5 days. 2 months later, 100 million users. May 2024, 200 million users. In May of 2023, ChatGPT logged 1.85 billion visitors to its website. In March and April of 2024, that number was quite similar. I don't think it's any coincidence that that coincides with final exams. all right? I think we can be almost certain that some of our own students were among those 1.8 billion visitors, and some were no doubt querying ChatGPT and asking it to write a 5-page essay comparing Borges to Cervantes. So the headlines of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chronicle seem to have these weekly articles about how society is reacting to this new technology. We all perhaps remember the lawyer who decided to use ChatGPT to write a legal brief which included fabricated case citations, right? Those hallucinations. The lawyer only discovered this after filing the paperwork, which led to their subsequent unemployment and a complaint filed by the judge in that particular case. And the turmoil continues. At the beginning of September of this year, National Novel Writing Month created a stir when it posted the following message on its website for the upcoming 50,000 Words in November challenge. NaNoWriMo does not explicitly support any specific approach to writing, nor does it explicitly condemn any approach, including the use of AI. Right? And these are groups of people who are trying to write novels. So the idea that it's actually saying using AI is okay feels a little bit odd. The Chronicle of Higher Education, Inside Higher Ed, seem to have an endless array of articles about AI and the demise of writing, the demise of higher education as we know it, and the demise of ethical behavior. That last might be an exaggeration, but the message is clear. This isn't your grandma's typewriter. Generative AI promises a disruption, a paradigm shift. But you don't quite know how to navigate that within the academy and the workplace. And its value and impact have yet to be determined. So will instruction change, and what does that look like? Barr and Tag wrote of the need for a shift from instructional paradigms to learning paradigms in higher education, undergraduate higher education in particular. And as they pointed out, the academy is very good at focusing on instruction, allowing it to align its pedagogy with its product, which is not necessarily educating students, but instruction. All right, so said another way, so when college and universities seek to provide excellent instruction to students, then they focus on excellent teaching. Learning is somewhat incidental. It's a byproduct, and learning is the student's responsibility. As instructors, we can measure their success via quizzes, exams, essays, and papers, assuming that high scores signify that learning has occurred. So Barr and Tag believe that a learning paradigm puts the responsibility for learning on the shoulders of the institution, the instructors, and the students. So we all have to be working together so that these students are learning. And not only that, but every generation we are actually doing a better job with those students. The research has been conclusive about the value of experiential learning. As Koshka writes, we know from theory based on cognitive processes that constructivist approaches to learning that require students to create their own knowledge and understanding work better than passive acquisition. In the nearly 30 years since Tag and Barr wrote their article, various pedagogies have surfaced to make the classroom more about the experiential and less about that transfer of knowledge between the professor's mind to the students, right? So we probably have experimented with blended learning, flipped classrooms, gamification, project-based learning, community-based learning, and they're all designed to focus on this experiential learning in one way. So many instructors have had great success with these approaches, but they are not ubiquitous. And I think if you walk in the halls of any, If you walk in the halls of any university during class hours, you will see and hear a range of pedagogies at work, from the faculty member who is lecturing from the podium to students who are working in small groups to be able to complete some type of a project, or perhaps an entire class that is engaged in something along the lines of reacting to the past. Barr and Tag's vision of an evolution to that learning paradigm has not yet transformed higher education, and they wrote in 1995. So we're 30 years past this, and we're still not seeing that learning paradigm in our classrooms, in all of our classrooms. So will GAI finally produce a shift to the learning paradigm, or will we fall back on more classroom-based assessments in an effort to ensure that we are grading students' work and not that of chatbots? So So when an emerging technology compels instructors to rethink that instructional paradigm, then we might really be able to think about an evolution in education. So I guess my question ends up being, is AI going to lead us into a different type of learning paradigm? At the same time that GAI may eventually trigger a paradigm change in the future, we have to manage its impact now, right? This is the challenge. So instructors' immediate concerns are related actually to the threat of GAI and what that means to academic integrity. I recently read a report by Wiley Publishing, and they had done a survey of 2,000 students and 850 faculty, and some of their findings are quite fascinating. One of the main takeaways state that 68% of faculty are worried that generative AI will have a negative or significantly negative impact on academic integrity. And both students and instructors believe that cheating will increase in the next 3 years due to generative AI. And let's not kid ourselves. Cheating is already a problem, all right, in the K through 16 education system. Work by Bloom in 2012, and then McCabe, Butterfield, and Trevino in 2012, among others, indicate that about 65% of students admit to having cheated, or 65%, it is a huge number, admit to having cheated or engaged in some form of academic misconduct at some point in their academic careers. And they further report that there's a shift in how students define cheating. So their research delineates a variety of reasons for this, including pressure from family and peers, their personal ambitions to achieve higher standards. And the more recent Wiley survey also cites that pressure to succeed, but also includes concerns that professors are assigning too much work. And I don't know about you, but I feel that after the pandemic, all of us perhaps pulled back on some of the assignments that we were giving to students because they were so stressed out at that point in time. Sometimes it's a lack of work and home balance. Certainly the lingering effects of the pandemic, students that, they're still not quite over what they had to do in order to be able to learn online. And what's really quite interesting is that it's the course's lack of relevance, all right? So if I don't need it for my major, right, it has no intrinsic value for me as a student. And one of the most prevailing reasons for cheating is that if their peers are doing it, and not 65% of them have admitted to that, they're saying, why shouldn't I? If cheating provides an advantage, then not cheating puts you at a disadvantage as a student. So Channing Carrollton warned that if used incorrectly, GII could mean that genuine learning takes a backseat to merely gaming the system. Lang's research into cheating talks about these 4 factors that can, let's say, impact students' proclivity or willingness or desperation to cheat in some way. And he talks about this emphasis on high performance, that's what we've seen before, high stakes outcomes, which mean the idea that we don't have a lot of assignments. There are many classes where there's simply one cumulative assignment that occurs at the end of the semester, which means your entire grade is based on something that's happening at the end of the semester, rather than them knowing bit by bit by bit over the course of the semester what that grade is going to be. If it's one test, one paper, that's it, right? That's the only feedback that they might be getting at that time. And so if it goes badly, it goes badly, right? That's just it. So they think that if you can talk about extrinsic motivation, that's also one of the things that students, again, are reporting encourages them to perhaps think that cheating isn't okay. The fact that we almost all have core curriculum, right, that series of courses that students have to choose, right, if you're not scientifically inclined, having to take a science course could mean for that student is that class isn't important to me, right? I'm not motivated in any way to do well unless I have that own personal motivation. And that could be grades or med school or something else that they want to do. He thinks that we can do some mitigating, mitigating conditions, including developing an intrinsic motivation, providing more student flexibility, so perhaps more assignments or a menu of assignments that students might be able to complete that also works better perhaps with their learning or the things that they are trying to do. And then creating grounded assignments, those that rely on personal, local, or interdisciplinary connections. And then lastly, again, lowering the stakes on those assignments. I think many of these suggestions can also be key for helping us to make assignments more GAI-proof or GAI-resistant in some way. In response to the launch of ChatGPT and the fear of misuse, the college where I teach has a symposium every fall. It's called the Symposium on the Curriculum. And in 2023, we devoted that entire curriculum to generative AI. Part of this was to make instructors aware that those tools were out there, free, and there had already been cases of academic misconduct, where students were completing assignments using that. So part of it was to educate us, but partly to help us think about how to circumvent students' use of GAI to complete courses. I think that the symposium felt more cautionary than actually helpful in the sense of, let's rethink the types of assignments that you're doing in order not to get to the point where students feel that it's okay to cheat in some way. After nearly 3 hours of presentations and discussions, 3 predictable camps emerged, and Roberto had 4 in those that he did, but I would say that there were 3 in my particular campus. And I've just named them the zero tolerance, the skeptics, the realist, and the fatalist. I think it's the same thing, right? Is this going to change what it is that I have to do? So the attitudes, as you may guess, towards the zero tolerance camp resulted in a general agreement among them that the solution was stricter policies on the syllabus about the use of GAI. And they would use plagiarism software on campus in order to see if they could check for it, and just being extra vigilant. Suspected perpetrators would be immediately referred to the Office of Student Affairs, and they would just have to face the consequences. The skeptics in the room had experimented a bit with their assignments in ChatGPT, and they evaluated the output. And they reported that they could spot what had been written by the chatbots because some of that information was simply erroneous. Right? And they thought the quality of writing was far inferior to what the average student could produce. So they imagined designing in-class assignments to prove that AI was incompetent, and once students knew that they could be caught, GAI would no longer be a temptation. Right? The last group, the realist and fatalist, and probably by the title of my presentation, you know that I fall within this group, believed that generative AI was not going away and would only get better. So I don't think that these attitudes are in any way outliers. I'm sure that you will find them across your campus in one way or the other. During that entire 3 hours, there was little discussion on how AI might be an instructional tool or advice, again, on how to create these GI-resistant assignments. Chan has written, professors are at a loss as to how to respond to AI. Some have resurrected assignment instruments from the pre-digital age, such as handwritten proctored essay exams or in-person oral presentations, tactics that introduce other myriad complications. Others have chosen to remain willfully ignorant, holding on to the delusion that their course content and teaching methods are so inherently exciting that AI would never enter the students' minds. We need to toss out a lot of our bad teaching tricks. That's where I've come down at this point, and we need to reassess this teaching paradigm. I think minor tweaks are going to buy us a little bit of time, but if we care about student learning, then I think we have to grapple with this technology and what it means on our campuses. So a couple of the things that I'm going to write here, some of these are from Lang, clear policies on our syllabus. This survey from that survey that came out from Wiley, only 40% of instructors said that they were putting policies on their syllabi about how to use GAI, which seems somewhat incredible that, again, I'm just pretending that it's not there and it will go away. Again, that moving away from 1 to 2 high-stakes assessment, but if you can't, then I would say, I think you have to create check-ins along the way, and people probably do that, but it's not everybody. So it's just an idea of giving students those opportunities to show that they're working on that assignment during the course of the semester. And I only teach undergraduate students, so graduate students have an entirely different motivation. When they're in your programs, they have intrinsic motivation, right? Undergraduates don't always possess that same type of motivation for what it is that they're doing. All right. Again, I like the idea of these grounded assignments, and don't think I'm going to have enough time to talk about that, but that idea has really changed the way I think about assignments. Again, undergraduate assignments for students, where you want them to do some investigation, some writing, right, some thinking about issues on their own, but you have to find ways so that they can't just put that into a chat GPT, right? So if you're asking for that 5-page essay on Picasso's Guernica in a Spanish class, I think you're just asking for ChatGPT to do the work for them, right? So creating different types of projects I think can help. And then I think this is the hardest. This is striving for intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation as a guiding force in every classroom really does require a rethinking of every course, every assignment. And I think we also have to think about what are our colleges and universities doing? So how do they approach learning? Is it an instructional paradigm or is it a learning paradigm? Because if it's only instructional, we're not going to change a lot, right? We're not going to make, I think, generative AI perhaps a partner in what we're doing. It's just constantly going to be this enemy that we're fighting against. And then keep in mind that Wiley survey said that 1/3 of students are willing to cheat if the class material is not relevant to them for their major. They just don't see that it's wrong to do it. Right? So as I get into this, I'm getting ready to land the plane, so here we come in. So we're going to talk a little bit about generative AI as a tool for instructors and students. So as with every emerging technology, as instructors, we have to adjust and change and adapt. And adapting for some is simply going to be adding a policy on their syllabi. That's all that they're going to do. For others, they're going to devote time to trying to outsmart it in one way, right? I'm going to create this case study, then I'm going to check it against other case studies that are out there, and then I'm going to see what ChatGPT is going to do. That's a lot of time, all right? And then for a smaller subset, and I think those people are actually in this room, it's pushing out of their comfort zone and introducing this technology into the classroom in some way. So I approached this generative AI challenge with 2 goals. The first was to think about how I could get GAI to do some of the repetitive and tedious aspects of teaching. So in other words, grading, especially the compositions of intermediate level students. And the second was to see if GAI could be helpful in creating some class materials. So since fall of 2023, I have asked ChatGPT or Gemini, whichever AI they choose to use, to correct the second draft of some short essays. So students in my intermediate Spanish class, rather than giving them 3 separate essays during the course of the semester, we work on a single one, right, that goes from the first to the second. It has one theme, all right, but that information becomes a little bit more complex as they go along. They talk about themselves, which is really a great intermediate level ACTA scale, right? They're very good about talking about their own likes and their dislikes. I asked them to write a letter to their future self. So what would they say to themselves in 20 years? So that information, again, very student-centered, and it's chunked into segments, right? We're not writing that one letter now. That letter is being written at different stages of the semester. So we're writing about every 3 weeks. So the first prompt that I would give them in class, ask them to write about who they are right now, right? Who they are in 2024. So they'll talk about things such as, I'm a student, I'm a first-year student, I'm nervous, I live in a dorm, I play football, I have a soccer team, my best friends are these types of people. Just that very current information. I don't give them the prompt ahead of time, right? I give it to them in class, and I give them about 20 to 30 minutes to write. And I do use free books for this. And they are allowed to access online dictionaries such as reference.com, but I float around the room answering their questions as well. They're ready in class to avoid their using online translators or generative AI. That first draft is always their own work because I'm seeing them create it during the class. And I can see what their writing style is. For me, it also checks the skill level that they have. What can they do with this language, right, at this lower level? Formative feedback for me includes comments on the information, connections between sentences, their overall organization, and their ability to create something thematic with all of that information. Some students do quite well at that. They're natural writers. They have a lot of experience with writing. Others are jumping from subject to subject to subject, and that requires more comments on my part to talk about, can you find a common theme here? How could you make those transitions between the sentences so it doesn't sound so frenetic? They rarely receive comments from me since I've been doing about this on grammar. I do sometimes give them comments about word choices because that can be a little bit more nuanced. But the step is focusing on content, coherence, and organization. So step 2 of the exercise, once the paragraphs are returned, and it doesn't take me that long at all, right? Once they're returned, I tell the students they have to type their original paragraphs into the generative AI of their choice with the following prompt: correct my Spanish, highlight my errors, and explain them to me. And ChatGPT will pull out most of the errors and provide an explanation. It's a personal tutor who makes no judgments about their use of Spanish. Everything is uploaded to Canvas and must include the following: the original paragraph that they wrote in class, the revised corrected version from ChatGPT, and finally, they have to reflect on the errors that they're making, right? Because ChatGPT is telling them the errors that they're making. And I think this last piece may be the most important, since it calls into play that metacognitive awareness. To write the reflection, they've got to go through those errors. They have to read about them and then generalize about those they repeat. This type of reflection has been shown to nurture these higher cognitive skills and facilitate transformative learning, while still allowing students to take that information and draw some insights about their own performance. So these are not long comments that they might make. Often they're quite short, all right? But it does make them stop and reflect. It's not, it feels as if they're actually thinking about why they're making these mistakes. Allowing GAI to handle the repetitive task of noun, adjective, and simple verb agreement, and misspellings and missing accents frees up my time for that formative feedback. I can focus on the content of their writing, right, and not their surface level forms. So I see my role as a guide in students to help shaping their writing and fine-tuning their thoughts, rather than writing coded messages for every single grammatical error. So with GAI, students get more of a personalized learning experience with an intelligent tutor who never tires of explaining word forms or noun adjective agreement. Moreover, it takes me much less time to provide those formative comments, allowing for a quicker turnaround of the assignment. So I had students do this assignment last Friday in class. I had 40 students. Over the weekend, I got them all finished. They have them back by Monday morning. And again, I am not grading every single error. I'm talking what's holistically going on here, right? That's what I want to focus on. That's what we're experts at, right? Rather than, oh my God, another missing accent. Nope, this is an agreement problem, right? I don't want to do that. If GAI can do that well, then let's let it do it. And for experts, right, who talk a lot about assessment, it's that feedback. What did I do wrong? I see what I did wrong, and this is how I can improve in the future. That's where that learning takes place. So I did this in 2023, and I only had one section of this course, so there were 18 students. Only 15 turned in their final paragraph, so obviously they were not intrinsically motivated to complete that assignment. They were willing to let that one go. But in a preliminary analysis of the student reflections, 60% commented about a reduction in the number of errors they were committing, or writing about their improvement, right? Which I thought was interesting as well, that by the time they got to the fourth one, they were able to say, yeah, I am making some progress here. So one student wrote, overall, I see significant improvements. Overall, I see significant improvements over the 4 paragraphs, as well as areas I need to work on. Another wrote, overall, I'm happy with how this paragraph turned out, and it's nice to see that I've noticeably improved with grammar throughout the semester. And the third, I thought that this paragraph was the most well-written one so far. I learned from my mistakes in prior paragraphs. Now, they received the same prompt. The instructions for the reflection don't change. It doesn't say, well, now you've come to the final one. How do you think that you've done? It still says, what do you think that you've done well? What do you need to improve? Right? So these are spontaneous assessments that they're making. This assignment does not assess their ability to write perfectly. Right? It is based on process writing, that they have to work through each stage of that feedback loop, assessing instructions, assessing suggestions about content, incorporating changes into their writing, checking their writing for accuracy, and reflecting on what they have learned. And in some cases, ChatGPT may have changed something, and they don't want it to say it that way. They don't mind the correction of a verb form or an accent, but they don't want it to change their voice, and that's an important lesson for them to learn as well, right? If they do all of those steps, I give them full credit. So I use specification grading on this assignment. Again, it's more important for me that they work through the process to get that final product than actually having to say, I'm grading you on the accuracy of your writing or how well you're writing at this point. For me, again, this is a process for students. At the intermediate level, how can we get them to work on the writing? How do we get them to feel that this is that grading is not always a penalty, right? If they do the work, they get credit for it. Some preliminary studies on chatbots have indicated that do pretty well with corrected feedback, and that can be pretty effective with students. But there's no doubt that additional research and study is needed, and I know that many of you in this room are doing that at this time. So is Gen AI flawed? Yes. Does it pick up all the efforts? No. Sometimes it says something is wrong when it's actually right. Sometimes it tells them to use one word and another word, but the original word they have is perfectly fine. And then I have to go back in and read through those to make sure that they're not getting some type of erroneous feedback. But it still saves me time, which I think is important. So this semester, I've also experimented with GAI, asking it to do some work for me. Can you provide a prompt for a series of situations that intermediate level students might have if they were traveling abroad? And it will come out with a series of prompts in the target language. They can be quite repetitive, but sometimes there's, you always get a couple of good ideas from it, right? And again, it saves me some time. After reading an article on GAI practice for conversation, I typed in the prompt, which I don't know if you can see up here, and then it was Tom, right? Thomas, who was telling us the other day about how he was using this for Chinese. And the prompt basically says, you're a Peruvian student, and I'm an intermediate level Spanish speaker in the US, so that we're settling that parameter that we're both students. We are having a conversation about our courses. Ask me some questions in Spanish, let me answer them, and then respond to my answer. So ChatGPT started to ask me questions. I backed it up at one point, and I said, hey, first, do you think you could tell me your name? This is who I am. It decided its name was Javier. Let's go, Javier. We'll be willing to do this. So it asked me the courses that I was taking this semester. I don't know why, but I have a bunch of students taking organic chemistry and mathematics. So I wrote that I was studying organic chemistry and mathematics. ChatGPT, Javier said, how's that going for you? And I said, not well. And then it started to actually say, well, what are you having trouble with? Are you having trouble with this or that? And I don't know those terms, right? I don't know what that is in organic chemistry. So I had to take that conversation out of that particular round. More along the lines of, oh, well, let's talk about why studying a foreign language might be a good idea. Which one says, yeah, foreign languages are great. They allow you to travel. They allow you to know more about different types of people. So as we got to the end, one of the questions that I asked it was to see if it would hallucinate some information. So I said, I'm thinking about going to Peru, and I'd really love to see Machu Picchu and the Nazca lines, the Líneas de Nazca, right? And I said, I heard that those lines were extraterrestrial landing sites. And I said, what do you think about that? And so it wrote, oh, they're wonderful places to go. But no, they are not extraterrestrial landing sites. They're actually more involved in ancient rituals of the Inca people. So I was not able to lead it down that particular garden path, which is good, right? Because we don't want students to start asking about the extraterrestrial origins of the Nazca lines. So I think that these examples represent my fledgling steps towards implementing GAI in the classroom, and I know that many of you have much more sophisticated examples that you're working with right now. I still believe that we're beginning to approach Bar and Tag's idea of that learning paradigm, where learning, we're measuring learning, we're just not measuring how we are as instructors. I think many AI supporters at this time highlight this dream of an educational utopia where each student has these individualized lessons, works at their own pace, and they're thirsty for knowledge, they're curious, and they're willing to keep working at a skill, not for the sake of a better grade, but simply because of the pleasure of learning. We are not there yet, right, with these students. The scary part of emerging technology is that it brings uncertainty and change. And it also brings opportunities for revolution and revitalization. If that Wiley survey is correct, only about 15% of instructors are using generative AI tools in the classroom. I am not surprised about this at all. The academy does not change quickly. The academy changes very slowly. The academy does not like to change its instructional model. But we may be reaching an inflection point where successful institutions lean into that learning paradigm because they have to in one way to be able to keep up, rather than trying to find out ways to maintain the status quo. All right. So with that, the plane has landed, and you can put your seats in an upright position, right? You can check the overhead compartments and make sure nothing has moved around during this particular flight. But thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for the wonderful presentations that you've given over the last 2 days.
Similar, it is relatively easy in elementary level courses if somebody has used ChatGPT and they're able to produce something that is well above the level of proficiency. And responses vary by faculty. Sometimes we call them and invite them to work again. But the same procedure, we have pretty much the same procedure as people's applying. That is available as an option on this. No, and I definitely don't use or endorse the use of AI detectors because they're quite error prone, and I think it's not worth it. But like I said, in my elementary Spanish class, it's relatively easy to see if somebody is using, if they're able to talk in different time frames with accuracy, that's like that. Right? So there's either external help in the shape of a person who's helping them, or they are copying it from someplace else, or they're using ChatGPT.
Yes, so things like for us as a teacher, it's really easy to figure it out. And as a student, have used AI to do something that's not allowed to do, but the consequences of the students are not really defined. You have like this window consequences that you have to prepare for. If the students has to redo the assignments, it's like it has no consequences.
So the reason that I give them opportunity is that going to the committee of standards of our institution is quite a time-consuming and energy-consuming process. I am willing to do that if it's necessary, but I would rather not have to unless it's really necessary. And some students, I am willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe them when they say that they did not realize that it was against the policy to use external help. It is stated in the syllabus. There are many things that are stated on the syllabus and students agree, and frankly I just put there because I have to put them. That's the policy of the college. So I'm happy to give them the benefit of the doubt if the situation calls for it.
I will say that the consequences for that cheating is often at the discretion of the professor. So even once that has gone to the Office of Student Affairs, that can be failure for a class. And if the professor has that in the syllabus, then yeah, our Student Affairs office will abide by that. Sometimes it's just the failure for that particular assignment. So over 20% of the grade, that's pretty devastating for a student. So I don't know if you work the same way. But that's very instructor driven as to what the consequences are before it gets to some type of a disciplinary.
There's no way to verify if something's been copy or pasted, but looking at spoken assignments or recorded assignments, that is a way to authenticate what the person has said. Would that make a difference in your cheating approach? Or thoughts about cheating?
I'm going to say, I don't know if I need to use this or not. I have seriously been revamping my longer assignments in classes to make them more grounded, right? How do I make them personal to the students? How do I make them local to our institution in some way? And how am I going to make them interdisciplinary? Because if a student has to do something that requires them to perhaps interview individuals for that assignment, if they have to bring up what are some of their own experiences in some way, it's very hard for ChatGPT necessarily to make that story up, right? So I think that that's really one way that we can help, that we can get that generative AI out of the equation. Because I really am thinking about how do we GAI proof assignments, because we still want them to write, we want them to analyze, but how do you do an assignment so that they just can't go in and here's my prompt, here's what the professor asked me to do. So really wide open prompts are not very good for students anymore. So then you asked me about word voices, right? What happens with that? I think that's harder to do because it's harder and it's not harder. If a student has used any type of online translator or GAI and sounds as if they are an advanced level student when they're only in their second semester, that's a pure sign that something has gone wrong there. And that is also a question of calling them into my office and saying, this is not your work. You might have recorded it, but this isn't your Spanish.
I loved your presentation and how clearly you delineated what skills they were getting from using, putting their answers into ChatGPT. One of the realizations that we've come to is that students weren't using it as much as we thought they were, and that we were teaching them to use it in some ways. And I wondered about the ones who you saw that it was beneficial that they were starting to use it to learn to speak Japanese or to write. Did you feel like there were others learners equally, where now they can use it as a tool and it would be as useful. That's some fear that my colleagues have had about using it as a writing tool that Khan Academy is saying to do, that you're introducing this and will take away their ability to generate their own ideas.
Well, initially, I thought they were using AI much more than I thought, and to my surprise, at the beginning of the semester, I asked my students how much AI they were using, and they weren't really positive about that, and I was really surprised about that. And like everybody knows, there has been a concern about using AI as a cheating or plagiarism. We kind of discussed and figured if they are using it, then if they are using it and trying to hide it, maybe we could have a way to have them use it in a more meaningful ways, and they can learn from them. And after our study, I haven't been using any AI this semester, and I don't see any evidence or anything that they have been using. So I'm not particularly worried about that.
Yeah, just a little bit adding about the beginning course. I didn't evaluate anything about the composition, like typing composition. I just gave the submission points, and after they submitted with AI checking, I gave the feedback more, and then I evaluated. So we discussed about that. Probably this semester I'm going to start the project outside of the textbook. I'm not going to evaluate the typing stuff, but I'm going to evaluate the presentation, in the classroom. Yeah.
Actually, it's a question also related, since we're talking about cheating to all the presenters here. I found that in my own experience, because I teach both language and literature coming from the liberal arts college environment, when the whole hype about ChatGPT started with, oh, they're going to cheat now, and my husband went back to Blue Books, I felt that as a language teacher, I wasn't really worried about that, because we've been dealing with Google Translate and other tools. And so my question is, as a literature teacher, it's different, right? When I have students writing, comparative works to Cervantes, I think that we have to rethink our literature and culture pedagogy to avoid, as Kim was saying, prompts, essay prompts that basically invite some kind of AI intervention. But do you think that our thinking about, as language teachers, our thinking about cheating has changed at all with AI? Because we have been dealing, I think, with even outside help, right? And so the question about the consequences, I think that it's a question that we could have asked 15 years ago and it would be the same thing. And so whether they have their best friend write the composition for them or AI would have dealt with it in the same way. So do you think there's anything new about this new technology in terms of second language acquisition?
Talking about cheating, no, not really. I mean, has other affordances as well, but I think in terms of academic integrity, I agree with that. We've heard this before with Google Translate, especially when it began using neural networks and moved away from its first technology. But in terms of cheating, and I mean, cheating has always existed, right? It's just the technology has also evolved. The teaching has with the cheating is using, I suppose. But speaking of words, I think in line with what you were saying, I think for me the question coming from the language teaching side is the question for me was never about whether language teaching or language learning as a profession would be able, how we would be able to incorporate AI, but why I've never been concerned about the how.
It probably up to the language, but like if I talk about like the Japanese language, we like between Japanese and English, like especially the Google translation are not good yet. So, and also like I can see like some Chinese staff, between the translation. So I don't think like between the Japanese and English at this point.
Over these couple of years, I kind of adjusted my way of assessing their works rather than worrying about them using AI. So I'm leaning more on their production level. I was giving them more of a grammar and reading comprehension exams before, and I kind of switched to giving them the short writings exams now, and giving them the entire questions and expectations beforehand so they can prepare and actually handwrite their answers in the class. And either they can prepare using AI, but if they can memorize what they prepare, maybe by using AI, they can still learn from the process. And you can kind of know if they are using AI or not, because we teach in Japanese, and if they're using AI, their Japanese can be naturally better than how they speak. So that's what I'm doing right now.
No, it was just more of a comment to that. I guess my experience now with the shift is that different from Google Translate, what the students can do is they can say, please write this prompt at an A1 level on the Common European Framework. So what we have
students who can do that?
Oh yeah, you can ask,
I know that
you
the
can ask ChatGPT, and they do that. So we're getting perfect compositions at an A1 or an A2 level, which is different from the previous use of Google Translate, where you kind of sense that the level was way beyond their capabilities. Now the level is at what they could be doing, but it's perfect, and we know that it's not theirs. And when the next, to your point, when it has been introduced to the Code of Academic, the Academic Integrity Office, they have no recourse, and the student is a free bird after the process. So that's where we're stuck. So that's why that whole changing the process has become all the more relevant, in my opinion. So anyway, that's just a comment.
I think that's an excellent point, and it's definitely easier to game the system with this technology. I think the strategies that we all use are pretty similar. We try to bring writing back into the classroom, which has sort of become outsourced to the students' free time, right? So we're, I think, probably we're all must doing a version of that. And I don't know, at some point the student wants to cheat that hard, and they're doing that. Congratulations, you paid a lot of money to cheat and have GPT write your essay for you. But no, definitely, I think it's I worry about that. I think writing in class is usually my go-to. And for me also, we try to come up with common policies that we share with students at the beginning, and talk about why or why not, and if they still want to do it, then there's only so much that you can do.
Very quickly, I wanted to ask Kim Armstrong, just because in our department right now we are very interested in the role of AI as a grading tool. Obviously, yeah. I work here with what are the
what are the attitudes that you've seen from the students in terms of AI or ChatGPT or whatever, giving them feedback on those, grammar, spelling, vocabulary mistakes? What are the attitudes, the opinions, the feelings that students have had in your class?
I have not had a lot of pushback from them. I did have one student the other day go, AI, right? And there was that type of reaction to it. But it's because of, it's how I'm grading this assignment. And for a long time, I've decided it can't just be about accuracy. It has to be about how well they're able to get that message across. So sort of trying to push down those filters that they have that this person's going to mark me wrong because I didn't use the subjunctive. No, they can't use the subjunctive at the intermediate level. So why am I marking them off for that, right? So I think that's perhaps the way I'm handling it. I think that the students sort of feel as if, she saw my paper and she gave me some comments about how well it's organized, or if I need to do a little bit more work on it, that's good. Because again, that's what I think that we're good at, right, is to talk about more holistically about what the assignment is. And then when they take it and put it into ChatGPT sees all the errors, but in reality, I don't see them all, right? So from their point of view, it's as if, well, I did make a lot of errors, but after all, the computer is the one that knows about it, right? Nobody else knows about it. It's been done in the privacy of my room and the computer, et cetera, et cetera. So I haven't had any pushback from it. And then again, I think the comments at the end have been at the very last prompt that I had given them, they were encouraging that students are actually beginning to see that they have made some progress over the course of the semester. And I think that actually putting into ChatGPT and seeing what their errors were was helping them. Because when we grade with codes, sometimes they take it, they fix it, they turn it back in, and they never look at it again, right? That's the end of it. So I think that there's sort of this constant feedback loop. That's my sense of it.
I have 15 more questions, but I'll let other people ask. We're going to talk about it.
It was not a question, it's just a comment listening to this. So it was not a question, it's mostly a comment listening to this conversation about cheating. So what I try to emphasize with my students is that I'm not trying to say that you're going to be in trouble, you're going to go to honors committee and all that stuff, but it's a loss of learning. So I think that at this point we need to emphasize that if you decide to not do the work and have an external entity do the work for you, you're not learning. If you choose to do that, then it's your responsibility. And the other comment that I also sort of try to emphasize is that this new technology, actually this is a technology that we can definitely use in a language class. And it's, if we compare it to Google Translate, for example, it was very hard to justify Google Translate in a language class, because then you go from L2 to L1, and there's no learning in that process, right? But with generative AI, you can stay in the L2, but at different levels. You can ask it to paraphrase, for example, a difficult passage of the language to a simplified version of it. And you can still stay in the language and keep learning. So, that's, I just wanted to share these two thoughts.
Any questions? So we can continue conversation later in your lunch, or you'll come to the reception, hopefully. So I think that, it's about time. So thank you again for all 4